Porsche soll heißen KDF fahren.
Wir haben dem Konstrukteur Dr. Porsche die denkbar größten Möglichkeiten verschafft, damit er frei von jeder Einengung seine Konstruktion von höchster Qualität vollenden und sie in einem beispiellosen Verfahren erproben konnte. Ohne Rücksicht auf die sonstigen Schwierigkeiten haben wir auf dieser Grundlage unsere Arbeiten mit dem Ziele begonnen, Ende 1939 den ersten Volkswagen rollen zu lassen.
Dr. Porsche was indeed a brilliant technical designer. Born in 1875, it wasn't long until his technical excellence started to show. At the age of 19, he installed an electricity system in his father's house. Porsche moved his attentions towards cars, and from an early age held a desire to produce a cheap, affordable car that everyone could own. The 1890 Porsche Lohner chaise, powered by 2 electric motors in the front hubs, was the first of his automobile designs. Motoring in Germany was restricted to the rich. Porsche was from a working-class background. His sympathies laid much more with the workers than with the financiers of the German car industry. He spent 18 years at Austro-Daimler in senior management, before resigning in 1923 after boardroom rows about cuts in the labor force. At the age of 55, Ferdinand Porsche formed his own design company. On a speculative basis, the Type 12 was produced, a small-sized car suited to the economic depression. Baron von Volkenheim, head of NSU, recruited Porsche to produce a car suited to the hard economic climate. The Type 32 was born. The engine, Beetle-like, 1470cc and air-cooled, proved good for speeds of up to 75 miles per hour. The body was designed by Erwin Kommender. However, NSU, under contractual obligations to Fiat, had to agree never to produce cars under their own name again. Porsche found himself without sponsorship for his Volksauto project. At the same time, Adolf Hitler had taken power. In order to get the country mobile, Hitler placed the production of a Volksauto high on his priority list. Jakob Werlin, an old friend of Porsche's, had heard about the Type 32, and in order to earn favor with the Führer, arranged a meeting with the two parties. Porsche was taken to the Kaiserhof Hotel in Berlin to meet Hitler and the Auto Union directors. Already during the development of the Zundap and NSU, my father had handed in his exposé about the building of a small car for Germany.
Ministerium in Berlin, im Reichsverkehrsministerium, ein Exposé abgegeben.
He wanted this car to be built as a cooperation between the whole industry.
Gemeinsam mit der gesamten Industrie zu bauen. Und dieser Gedanke wurde von Hitler aufgegriffen.
Hitler picked up this idea.
Ob nun Hitler vorher schon die Idee hatte.
If he got this idea before or after reading the exposé, no one can tell. Anyway, at the car exhibition of 1934, he mentioned Volkswagen for the first time.
Bei der Automobilausstellung das erste Mal von einem Volkswagen gesprochen.
At the meeting, Hitler showed an impressive knowledge of cars, producing rough sketches and a 5-point plan for his version of the people's car. Hitler persuaded the RDA, the German car manufacturers' trade organization, to sponsor Porsche and aid the development of the Volksauto. Jealous of his innovative designs, the major car manufacturers boycotted Porsche, forcing him to design and build on his own premises in Stuttgart. By the end of 1935, 2 cars were testing in the Black Forest. The prototype's Type 60s covered over 50,000 miles. Porsche was granted a further 12 months development period, mainly to work on engine trials. 2 cars were built, a V1 sedan by a coach builder Reuter and a V2 cabriolet by Draus. Later, 3 more were commissioned, built by Daimler-Benz. Finished in early 1936, the plant at Wolfsburg is unable to cope with the increased demand for their cars. The factory refit enables modern, more productive assembly methods. Sister factories are built at Hanover, Kassel, and later at Emden. Advertising brochures of the early 50s portray the Beetle as a highly styled, desirable car. Ben Pon established an export market in the late 1940s, contracting an order of 56 sedans for Holland. The Volkswagen export drive began with very modest beginnings. This Beetle saw the start of German industry abroad. Built in Ireland from 1950, most of its parts were manufactured there too. Herr Lottermann, a renowned collector from Bad Camberg, shows off a particularly rare model from the 50s.
Hier stehen Sie bei einem der seltensten Exemplare.
You're looking at one of the rarest Volkswagens ever.
Es wurden
In 1953, the Rometsch Company of Berlin converted 15 cars into taxis.
Käfer als Taxen umgebaut. Das Fahrzeug wurde in der Mitte durchgeschnitten.
The frame of the car was cut in half in order to extend the length by 24 centimeters.
Eingebaut. Seinerzeit war der Preis für dieses
The converted car cost 7,500 Deutschmarks, which wasn't cheap considering you could get a 4-door Mercedes for 8,800 Deutschmarks.
Für die damalige Zeit war das auch sehr viel Geld, da bereits ein Mercedes 180 Taxi viertürig 8.800 Mark gekostet hat, also nur 1.300 Mark mehr. Dieses Taxi wurde von Neuheit
The car was driven in Frankfurt between 1953 and 1970, accumulating more than 450,000 kilometers.
150.000 Kilometer gelaufen mit mehreren Motoren natürlich.
I'm Chris Clark. I'm a Volkswagen enthusiast and restorer. Volkswagens are the love of my life. I've owned Volkswagen cars for many years. The first car I ever owned when I was 17 was a Volkswagen Beetle, and I've had a succession of Volkswagen Beetles ever since. At the moment, I own about a dozen restored Beetles and probably many more unrestored. I'm trying to collect Beetles for every year they made them. At the moment, I have probably half the Beetles I'm looking for, although I'm always ready to buy other Beetles when they come along. My children both drive Beetles, and all my friends own Volkswagens of one sort or another. This particular model is a 1956 sunroof left-hand drive, which was made originally for the German market. In my estimation, the 56 Beetle is probably one of the best Beetles they ever made. At this stage, they had made over 1 million cars and were really getting into the run of things, and cars were beginning to be exported. The Volkswagen factory was very advanced as an automobile producer, and it was a leading car by this stage, but still handmade to a degree, and still a very modern and advanced car capable of sustained high speeds on motorways and longevity of life. There are still a large number of oval windowed Beetles running around, and they are greatly sought after, and probably of all the collected Volkswagens, they are the most popular car at the moment because there are so many readily available. The feel, it's a very responsive car. You have the engine in the back pushing you, and the steering is very positive. The gearbox, even on the old ones, are very smooth, and the acceleration for a small car is quite surprising. In their day, they were quite sporty, although obviously now just average. It doesn't matter which Beetle you're in, which year, once you get behind the wheel and put it into gear, they all have that same feel, very positive. The engine's at the back, the steering's reasonably light, but with all-round independent suspension, you can go up quite a bumpy road and the car will take it in its stride. Even on cobbled streets, the Beetle suspension handles brilliantly. As you ease it into first gear and away, the German engineering that's in the gearbox is superb, as is the engineering in the whole car. In fact, German gearboxes are found in many cars all around the world. They were initially built for, well, in Germany, the idea was it was a car you could take on a motorway and drive at 60 or 70 miles an hour all day long. And that is still true today. But with all-round independent suspension, which was quite advanced for a car of the 1930s or 1940s, and as this is a 56, it's quite positive and very good road holding. Can out-corner most cars of its type. I used to rally one of these and was very successful, and I was rallying a 1958 and 1960 Beetles and seeing off most of the current cars at that time, especially on the country lanes and on the rough roads where the Beetle suspension is unbreakable. You could drive a Beetle through a ploughed field and with very little wheel spin, because the weight over the driving wheels would keep you going. Every Beetle, every year, they brought in new improvements. And it's quite, when you work on a succession of cars, it's quite surprising to see how quickly they improved and modified it. In fact, every year, there's probably more than 100 improvements on the Beetle, so that by the time they'd made 20 million, the car must have been just about perfect. The handle on the dashboard is a period accessory. From 1960, that handle was fitted as original equipment. The parcel shelf under the dashboard was a very popular accessory, as is the handle that extends the reserve petrol tap. This car was outside somebody's house for 20 years, unused, and it had been written off by many people as being too far gone. But such is the enthusiasm of VW owners. If they find a Beetle, there's normally a way to restore it. Why is the Beetle so popular? I can think of 101 reasons why the Beetle isn't popular or wouldn't be popular. And when you drive one sometimes with the windows steaming up and your nose close to the windscreen and the noise of the engine and the shortage of luggage space, you wonder what it is that is so appealing. But on the other hand, having owned Beetles all my life, I just wouldn't want to collect any other form of car. The car is so appealing. When you're out on the road, it's a car that everybody looks at because they realise it's an engineering miracle. It's a car they've made over 20 million of. It's a car they can't improve. They stopped making the Beetle a few years ago, although they're still being made in Mexico and still selling as well as they ever did. And the second-hand market for the Beetle seems to go on and on and on. And it appears now that more people want to own a Beetle than they ever did. The car, even a 40-year-old model, will drive on a motorway just like a modern car. You feel totally safe. You can go anywhere in it. It's the only car that, if somebody said to me, I want to buy a second-hand car that's reliable, you could really put your hand on your heart and say, that's the car for you.
This is the millionth Volkswagen which came off the production line on the 6th of August 1955 in Wolfsburg. It has become a unique car because it was the first European car which reached a production number of 1 million.
Kein anderer Hersteller hatte bis dahin 1 Million Exemplare von einem Auto hergestellt. Für Volkswagen war das ein Anlass.
Volkswagen thought of something special for this occasion. The car has a gold metallic spray job and a special interior for which the cloth was specially imported from Paris.
Sie sehen im Inneren eine Brokatpolsterung. Die Stoffe wurden aus Paris extra eingeflogen. Die Chromteile waren ursprünglich alle.
The chrome parts originally had all glass components, but we've changed it since because all that was left of the glass parts were the holes in the bumpers.
Der Wagen ist nie gefahren worden, oder ich sollte vielleicht
The car has never, or to be more exact, has hardly ever been used. We used it for filming once. Apart from that, it's purely for exhibition here in the museum.
Von der Tatsache, dass nun als Schmuckstück im Museum steht.
That was a look at the world the VW has conquered and shall continue to conquer.
Have you ever wondered how the man who drives a snowplow drives to the snowplow? This one drives a Volkswagen. So you can stop wondering.
it struck me as this incredibly honest car and a very honest approach in the advertising. Over the years I got closer and closer to the advertising, more involved in it, working with David Abbott, who was the creative director of Doyle Dane Bernbach, who of course created the campaign, both in the States, in the UK and worldwide. And eventually I kind of fell in love with advertising and gave up the job at VW and went into advertising to become a copywriter myself. So it's kind of, it pushed me into completely changing my career.
Welcome to the Volkswagen factory, where every day a bloodthirsty mob of 8,397 inspectors decrees whether or not a Volkswagen will live or die. Should it lose favor with any one of them, even for the slightest whim, it will die. Should any one of its 5,000 parts be deemed defective, even for reasons unseen by the untrained eye, it will die. For only after every single part has passed at least 3 inspections, and only after 16,000 triumphant inspections in all, may a contestant then leave this arena with a worthy title, Volkswagen. Now, let the games begin.
With Beetle advertising, it was always extraordinarily consistent. It dealt with 2 issues: the simplicity of the product, the reliability of the product, and the individualistic look of the car. But it was always wrapped up again in very simple kind of communications. If you go back to the very beginning of television advertising and indeed to press advertising, you will find that by the late 50s, early 60s, advertising became progressively kind of jazzier and terribly lively and especially in the United States, dance singles and God knows what else, and product features by the million. Volkswagen advertising just simply said, this is a good quality product, you can rely on it, and it'll take you there.
This is a dramatization of a true story. On November 28, 1970, a terrible storm developed in the Sierra Nevada mountains. 6 months later, when emergency crews cleared the road, something strange happened. A car was found, a Volkswagen, buried beneath tons of snow and ice. But even stranger than that, when the crew supervisor turned the ignition key,
in the 50s, when this agency called Doyle Dane Bernbach was set up, at the head of it was a man called Bill Bernbach, who was a very intelligent and he's a very gifted copywriter. And he decided that they might try something different in advertising, and it was called truth. Now, if you bother to go through Doyle Dane Bernbach's advertising of the time, and you'll find that most of the ads were actually very truthfully written. There was no glamour attached to them, and they were always very elegantly laid out. You could read them, and they weren't fussy or flashy, which up until then, I would say, would be the natural way that everybody perceived advertising. And especially with the Volkswagen campaign, and if you could be bothered to compare the Volkswagen ads of the early 60s when they were done and other car advertising, they are incredibly different.
Presenting the Great Zandu. The Great Zandu will now amaze you with his incredible mental powers.
When a car is essential to your job, you want it fixed in a hurry. A Volkswagen dealer can replace an engine in little over an hour, or a fender with just 10 bolts. And with genuine Volkswagen parts always available, you'll be back to work in no time.
Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Great Zandu. The Great Zandu will now...
It was a terrific car. I mean, again, I think though the ads deserve a lot of credit, advertising isn't a kind of witch doctor. It can't create something that isn't there. It's like a barrister, it's an advocate. You can stand up and you can put the best case for something, but you can't invent a case for something. This was a car that was right for its time, that had charm and practicality, and I think it became a classless car in a strange sort of way. It was a car that if you didn't have a lot of money, you bought because you wanted it, not simply because it was dictated by your bank balance. And we made we made it a car, I think, for people who think. I mean, it was a car that you bought because of your intellect, not because of your bank balance.
I, Maxwell E. Snavely, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath the following. To my wife, Rose, who spent money like there was no tomorrow, I leave $100 and a calendar. To my sons, Rodney and Victor, who spent every dime I ever gave them on fancy cars and fast women, I leave $50 in dimes. To my business partner, Jules, whose only motto was spend, 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 I leave nothing, nothing, nothing. And to my other friends and relatives who also never learned the value of a dollar, I leave $1. Finally, to my nephew, Harold, who oft-times said, a penny saved is a penny earned, and who also oft-times said, gee, Uncle Max, it sure pays to own a Volkswagen. I leave my entire fortune of $100 billion.
Yeah, I think the influence of Volkswagen and of Doyle Dane and that style of advertising will be with us forever. I mean, it changed really the way that advertising talked to its audience. I think in certain times of recession and certain hard times, the whimsy and the humor and the ease and relaxation of that kind of advertising maybe is pushed into the background, but it will never disappear. It is the best way to sell a product.
Mr. Jones and Mr. Krempler were neighbors. They each had $3,000. With his money, Mr. Jones bought himself a $3,000 car. With his money, Mr. Krempler bought himself a new refrigerator, a new range, a new washer, a new dryer, a record player, 2 new television sets, and a brand new Volkswagen. Now Mr. Jones is faced with that age-old problem, keeping up with the Kremplers.
Volkswagen subsidiaries are established worldwide, covering every continent on the globe. Herr Lottermann discusses part of his foreign collection.
Ich stehe hier vor einem Volkswagen 1500 Kubik.
I'm still in front of a VW 1500 right-hand drive.
Rechtssteuerung. Dieses Fahrzeug habe ich von einem
I bought it from an Aussie who had visited my 4th international meeting.
4. internationales Bad Camberger Treffen besucht hat. Das Fahrzeug
The car was like new, no rust, no dust, as if it's just left the factory.
Es ist also, als wenn das Fahrzeug direkt von der Fabrik auf die Straße kommt. Sie können hier mal nachsehen. Ich gehe also mal vor und Sie können hier unten mal drunter sehen, wie sich das alles verhält. Zu der Qualität.
As far as the quality of the Mexican Beetle is concerned, compared to the German Beetle, it leaves much to be desired. It might have to do with the Mexican climate, but craftsmanship, paintwork, chrome and trimmings are not up to German standards. The Beetle is still rolling off the production lines in Mexico. For the rest of the world, it is the bug enthusiasts who keep the legend driving on.
Well, my name's Richard Cotton. I'm treasurer of the Leicestershire and Warwickshire VW Club, and this car is an example of what aficionados know as a split window. There's about 70 of these in the country, but this particular model's only been in the country 1 week. I collected it myself from North Germany. It was made in April 1952, and it was delivered to Sweden, where it remained until a few months ago when it was brought from that country. A couple of things that make it unique in this country, and that is the plates on the bottoms of the rear wings, which are only put on for the Swedish market. It's also got a sump heater, which was put on especially for very cold climates, and the idea of that is it heats the oil up before you start the car, otherwise it's almost impossible to start. There are quite a lot of these cars in Sweden, and the reason for that is that up until 1952, the only car that one could buy commercially in Sweden was a Beetle, and it was in 1952 that the Volvo then hit the local market, and so all the locals then started buying Volvos instead. The split window in this country is something of a rare item. I said earlier, there are about 70, but something like 25 of them are in pieces and will take many, many years to restore. I think what makes them so desirable for collectors is those two small back windows. It just gives the Beetle such a classic feel. Somehow it's not quite the same when you look at a later car and it's got the larger windows. A lot of other things on it, though, make it quite different to quite easily distinguishable. The bumpers, for instance, have got a groove down the middle. These groove bumpers are highly prized and very, very rare. The rear lights as well have got little tiny round rear lights. They're also desperately hard to find, very rare. The other thing as well is the wheels that, although it probably isn't instantly recognisable, they're 16-inch wheels, whereas everyone knows that Beetles have got 15-inch wheels. So these are an inch bigger, which just give it that slightly raised appearance off the ground. I've heard it said that the Beetle hadn't really changed in the whole 50-year history of the car, but I don't think you'd need many photographs and many shots of the car to realise that there are numerous differences. Another obvious one is these windows. The passenger door has what's now called cowl-up windows, but of course in 1952 when this was built, this was original. They didn't introduce quarter lights until 1953. So it seems that history has come round again. The car itself is in very good original condition. There are numerous features on it which single it out from restorations. The body trim, for instance, has also a groove down it and is original. And what one finds generally with split window Beetles is that they have been perhaps used well into the 1960s and maybe 70s, and many of the original pieces have gone. So it's quite unusual to find a car like this in this condition. Although having said that, Sweden and Belgium do seem to be the places to look.
My name is Tom Dobson. I live down in Sussex, and I'm a retired airline captain. In my job, I used to fly down to Tripoli, see the old wartime Beetles down there, and I became interested in them. And in looking for one of those, I saw the advertisement for this, and I bought it for £60 in 1964. It is a police car, a German police car, which they only made about 150. There are two left, and this is one of them. The other one's in the States. As you can see, it's an open four-door, which makes it unusual for a Beetle. The car was built in 1951 by the Papler Company in Cologne. Used for the police, God knows how many miles it's done. I bought it in 1964, as I said. I scrapped it in 1965 because it was rotten. In 1978, I rebuilt it. I was in between jobs at the time. And put the wheel on the English side, as you can see, made the specifications up to modern road conditions, insofar that it has disc brakes now, 12 volts, a big engine in the back, it's very fast. It's got all really, I guess, it goes all the time. It's never been polished, but we wash it now and then. We use it regularly as a road car, it's not a show car. And I suppose this 4 doors makes it unusual for a Beetle.
My name's Bob Shale. I'm editor of the International Vintage Volkswagen magazine. The car I'm standing beside is a 1952 Stoll Coupe. The car was manufactured on the 15th of September 1952. The new owner, his name was Bernard Rippenhausen, he was a lawyer. He decided to send his brand new car to a firm in Bad Nauheim, which was Stoll and Company, and had a modification to a coupe Beetle. He owned the car for around about up to about 1969. He sold it to 2 Americans who were travelling Europe. They brought the car over to England in 1970 and sold it to somebody in London for their airfare home. The car was stolen from the new owner and was found abandoned in South London. I bought the car in 1976 and I had to do a total restoration, which has lasted nearly 15 years. And it was the actual job was finished in May of this year, and I estimated I spent in a region around about 10 to 15,000 to have the car completely restored, top to bottom. As you can see, the car's unique. It's the only one I actually ever built.
The design of the Beetle, as most of you know, has not changed from its inception back in 1938, I believe. The same design has been with us all through the years. And we in the United States saw it as a good general car. There was no need to change the design. And Detroit would force upon unsuspecting buyers maybe a new car, a new design almost every year, and that would help their sales, I guess. But we enjoyed the Beetle. It stayed the same, the design stayed the same. There was no reason to change it. It was very dependable. And we enjoyed it. There was, we didn't have to buy a new car to impress our neighbors. That same shape was the same year after year. And we enjoyed it. It's the best car ever made, never will be made. It's not like the big iron of Detroit that they try to push on us through the years, the big chrome machines, the big gas guzzlers. The Beetle always sipped the gas and always was dependable, and it always started and always got us through the winters. It was the most dependable and the best car ever built, and that's why we built it. Also because it was German.
soll heißen,